A statement from Jack Kirby's son, which was posted to Twitter by Jack Kirby's granddaughter, has really put a big damper on the recently released Stan Lee documentary on Disney+. The statement from Kirby's son basically calls Stan Lee an egotistical prick, and he's pissed at the fact that the documentary doesn't give his father, Jack Kirby, and others any credit for building Marvel into what it is today. So who does deserve the credit? Let's talk about it. Most, if not all of the credit goes to Stan Lee for creating a lot of the characters that we know and love in today's day and age, including Spider-Man, the Hulk, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, X-Men, you get the idea. From face value, it seems like Stan Lee was the main creator of Marvel and pretty much everything that had to do with it, as he was the face of Marvel ever since its young days in the comic game, all the way up until his recent death and in the basically huge entertainment industry. But there's been a huge beef in actually who has created all of these characters even since the early days of Marvel, as many of the illustrators and artists had a hand in creating these characters. Probably one of the biggest illustrators and artists, Jack the King Kirby, who definitely had a big hand in helping to create a lot of these characters. Now, Jack Kirby was the sole creator of Silver Surfer, but doesn't get his due credit for his helping into create the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, X-Men, and so forth. There's also Steve Ditko, who we really don't hear a lot about, who actually helped to create probably one of the most famous superheroes of all time, and that is Spider-Man. So if we go back to the recent statement released from Jack Kirby's son, it makes it sound like Stan Lee was a bumbling buffoon who got credit for creating all of these characters at Marvel because he was put on a pedestal by Marvel and he was the one promoting Marvel Comics. First, I don't think it's fair to say that Lee is an idiot or a bumbling buffoon based on what the statement sounds like, from the sheer fact that obviously Lee helped to create some of these characters, and yes, he was the face of Marvel and he helped to build it into what it is today. First off, I think Jack Kirby's son needs to peel it back a second, because the first paragraph and a half of his statement is basically ridiculing a documentary about Stan Lee being about Stan Lee, essentially. Like, what do you expect? They're not going to go into full detail about Jack Kirby and other people because the documentary's not about them, it's about Stan Lee. And he gets mad at the fact that it's basically talking about Stan Lee and it's all from his viewpoint. And that's just the way that the producers and the directors decided to make this documentary, were all clips and put them together from interviews that Stan Lee had done in the past. I don't necessarily agree that it was the best documentary. I was expecting a little bit more, but you can't get mad at a fact that it's all about Stan Lee and he uses words like I and me because he's the one talking about himself. And it's a documentary about himself from interviews collected from Stan Lee. Now, in the documentary, Lee does go on to say that because he thought that he had the idea of a character that may not have been fully fleshed out, that it was originally his IP and that he was the creator of the character, even though it wasn't fully thought out, and then eventually got help from maybe some of these artists and other people who helped, draw this character. It even goes into the documentary and talks about kind of quote unquote the Marvel process, where Stan would give the artists a basic plot line and they would just go ahead and draw out a story. And sometimes they would put in the margins what was going on or what their thoughts were to maybe help move the plot line and the story along. And then Stan would get those drawings back and then draw the bubbles and write out the lines from each character, basically then creating the story. Again, you can argue that because it was originally Stan Lee's idea for creating a character such as maybe say Spider-Man, but if he didn't have it fully fleshed out and he got help from other people, in this case Steve Ditko, is it all his creation or did they co-create Spider-Man? Then you could argue that, okay, Steve maybe helped with the plotline for some stories and then drew him, but Stan Lee is who gave him his personality and his ethos of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. So does he get more of the credit? At the end of the day, you could really go either way on this. I'm sure some characters, just like Jack Kirby's son had mentioned in his statement, where some artists came in, I have a great idea for a character, but then again, maybe Stan Lee helped flesh out more of that and helped with the storyline and again, their personality. So was it all just one person? It was probably somewhere in the middle. And from my research and what I've seen is that they work together really well as a team, even though they may not have necessarily enjoyed each other, but they definitely needed each other to complete and make a whole story and a whole character. But you could say that all of this is unfair because Stan Lee is still essentially the face of Marvel, of basically the main creator and the person who built Marvel to what it is this day. I would argue to say that he partly is. From what I know, Stan Lee was an employee at Marvel, where most of these artists, including Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, were all paid as freelancers. They weren't necessarily employees. Also, from what I know, Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby and other artists didn't necessarily want to be interviewed or talk about what was going on behind the scenes and promote Marvel per se. So someone had to go ahead and do it. And guess what? Stan Lee had the best damn personality and the charisma to build something huge. Now, did this feed into his ego? I'm sure it did. It probably would for most people. But someone had to go out there and promote and talk about Marvel. He's the one that, yes, did all these interviews. He went to places and did these talks, had his own little column, I think, that went out every week or month, whatever it was. Someone had to do it. Otherwise, Marvel would have never lasted. It would never exist today without someone taking the reins and being the face of Marvel. That's just how it goes. Look at how Apple is with what Steve Jobs did, but we know that Steve Jobs wasn't the only person. There was also Steve Wozniak, who was behind the scenes, and he never gets any credit, as where Steve Jobs does get all the credit. That's the same thing that we see here. Yes, Jack Kirby was definitely a big part in bringing Marvel to what it is today, along with many other artists and other people. It's just unfortunate that they don't get the recognition that Stan Lee does. Now, is that fair? I don't think so, but I think we can all go to say that life is not fair. Again, you have an opportunity in front of you. Stan Lee is the one who seized it. Not to say that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's just how it was. What I do have to say is that I know very little about Stan Lee besides what I've seen in the documentary and just know of him from other interviews and what I've read about him. Overall, I do have to say that he does seem like a very nice person. Many people wanted to be around him. Obviously very charismatic, and he has helped build something today that I thoroughly enjoy and get a smile out of almost every day. I'm sure that he's brought a lot of smiles to lots of other people. Is he the only one that should get credit for bringing Marvel into what it is today? Most likely not. I do wish that he gave probably more credit to more people where it was due, instead of just saying that it was just him that fully created things. What are your thoughts on Stan Lee in this whole creation process and giving credit where it's due? Let me know down below in the comments. If you like this video and you want to see more Marvel content, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. And if you want to get more content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.